So thank you all for joining us for the strategies for surviving the thesis and dissertation process. Joining us today, Dr. John Hirano, PhD in Electrical Engineering, University of Hawaii, Dr. Jennifer Stevens, PhD in Sociology, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and Dr. Jessica Nav-Blodgett, PhD in Psychology, University of Nevada, Las Vegas. So they'll be answering your questions about how to survive your thesis and dissertation process. So I'm going to hand it over to them for introductions, and then we will begin taking questions. John, if you wouldn't mind starting.
Absolutely. Again, my name is John Hirano. I did my research, my PhD work at the University of Hawaii, with a focus on electrical engineering, with a focus on renewable energies and sensor development. Nowadays, I have transitioned a little bit. I am currently working with U.S. Bank. The Graduate College has been one of our great partners over the last couple years as we provide goals coaching for students within our graduate program, undergraduate program, even alumni. And it's an opportunity for us to really help students and all of you out there to really focus on your goals, both personal, financial, and professional goals. And we're here to help. I'm usually on campus a little bit more this coming semester, so I hope to see some of you face-to-face in the future. And that's a little bit about myself.
Jen, you want to go next?
Sure, thank you. My name is Jennifer Stevens. I got my master's and my PhD from the sociology department here at UNLV. I also work at the grad college with the dissertation, thesis and dissertation formatting. I'm the head of that, so always looking at different thesis and dissertation. I just finished last spring, so recently new, but yeah, loving it. I teach a couple of different positions. I teach at UNLV, and I also teach at a school, Sinclair Community College in Dayton, Ohio. So yeah, I would just love to share some of my experience from being on the student end, but also kind of being on that back end or the graduate college end, things to keep in mind for that also. So yeah, happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jen. Jessica?
Hi, everybody. As Marlena said, my name is Jessica Blodgett. I graduated from UNLV in 2020 with my PhD in psychology. I focused on auditory neuroscience, but my research was really in how we perceive music and how we perceive speech and how we make sense of the sounds and the really complicated and nifty sounds in the world around us, especially things like music and speech, and how that changes from infancy through childhood, through adolescence, and into adulthood. So I could talk your ear off about how much I love music and how cool our ability to perceive these complex auditory sounds is. But that's not what I'm here about. I am here to talk to you about the writing process. So I am actually completely out of academia. I took a big pivot. I think we all know that there's this big thing going on, like the pandemic, that really changed everybody's intended trajectories and things like that. So I actually now work for a scientific and engineering consultancy in Phoenix. And I focus on human factors issues in litigation support, where basically, how does, human interactions with technology, with the environment, with any sort of products or situations, how does that affect, like in terms of legal proceedings, what would a normal person perceive or do or think? And I actually interact with scientific literature all the time, and I write really long literature reviews, and I take my knowledge of basically the academic sphere and all the scientific research about human perception and cognition and action, and apply that to support litigation efforts. So that's a little bit of what I do and how I still use writing all of the time in my job.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I think we will jump right into questions now. What did you most struggle with while writing your thesis or dissertation? And if you did write both, do you mind just touching on if you thought the struggles were similar or different in any way? And I will open that up to you guys on who wants to get started.
I'll go ahead and start. I think one of the biggest, there's many similarities, I think, and many differences. I think timing and making a timeline, having that to-do list in the back of your head and on paper, making that timeline is super important for both of those, just to make sure you stay on track with your own work. But I think some of the major differences are that with the thesis, I think I questioned myself more on the smaller, I don't know if you want to say smaller is the right word, but am I using the right tools for the job, right? Am I using the right theorists and the right literature and all of this, millions of questions about that. And then with the dissertation, I think those questions just shifted about, am I contributing enough to the field? Is this significant enough? Is this important enough? And I think you spend so much time, and the two of you, please share if this is like similar or different from your experience, but you spend so much time working so closely on that document. I think sometimes that, you start to think at some points, like, does this even make sense? Or is this important? Or, am I getting across what I'm trying to say? So similar in some of those issues of trying to pace yourself and stay on track. But I think different with maybe some of the struggles about what you're writing exactly. That was my kind of experience with those two.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Okay. So I did two different styles for the master's. I did both my master's and my PhD, my dissertation at UNLV. For my master's, I did a traditional master's format, but for my PhD, I did a 3-paper dissertation. So they were actually quite different formats and thus had different struggles. For the master's, part of it was just sort of figuring out what I want to do and then limiting myself to like the appropriate length of depth versus breadth. And generating like that gigantic document versus the dissertation had sort of extra levels of struggles in it because some of it was entirely out of my hands. I had to have everything submitted and I had to have at least one published or in press article. So some of that I couldn't control the timeline because I was dealing with reviewers, I was dealing with lots of different things. I was dealing with, like getting the documents, kind of getting a bunch of separate documents ready at different stages while still focusing on the overarching goal of creating a document that made sense and flowed. And then at the same time, I was also trying to create my bridging chapters, trying to figure out, like what is that narrative? So it was kind of like juggling a lot of different balls, and actually more like juggling, here's a pin, here's a ball, here's a chainsaw, here's all sorts of things. And that was definitely a struggle, along with, well, the situational issue of like the last 6 months, like we left for spring break in March of 2020 thinking we'd be back right after spring break, and then we never came back. And writing in isolation is hard. And not having that social thing for those last 6 months of my dissertation, that added it. Like, it's writing, but it's not writing, because writing, you need to be in a good mental place and a good holistic health place so that you can do your job. So that was a struggle on how to manage that in the early days of the pandemic, where we were all completely isolated, and finding that sort of social support when we could no longer be together. That was definitely a struggle. And then, so that was like a whole element of control that was taken away in a process where you don't have a lot of control or as much as you'd like. So that was definitely a struggle, in learning to deal with that. But I think the 3-paper dissertation has some extra challenges because all of a sudden you're managing multiple timelines that you don't have as much control over, and you're trying to make progress in parallel rather than sort of following that linear progress that the traditional de novo dissertation would have.
No, yeah, I think for me, a lot of the same, right? It's a lot of it is some of the time management. I think is always a struggle trying to balance out, research, your research, sometimes your professor's research, all those other pieces to it. But I think for me, the biggest struggle sometimes was understanding when to be done. when just to be done with it, because you can keep going deeper and deeper. And from an engineering standpoint, it's always like, I can always design more. I can always find a new function. I can always get that next step in there. And sometimes you just have to know when it's time to be done. And I think sometimes that's the hardest part of just going through that journey of you're putting the effort in and you're spending years at it. I know for myself, it was a several-year journey through it. My particular had a bridge program from a bachelor's straight into a doctoral program. And so you kind of grouped all that master's and dissertation work into one big project. So the ask was big, but a lot of it was just kind of knowing like, okay, it's time. Let's wrap this up. Let's be done. Let's move on to that next chapter. But while still, like I think you've all said, making sure that you still contribute what you need to contribute to your field of study, because that's what it is at the end of the day. You have to be able to show that you contributed that new piece of knowledge to your field, right? And sometimes you feel like you have, and sometimes you feel like you haven't. But when you have some good mentors and some good advisors, they're like, no, you're done. You're good. Let's get to that next thing, because that next chapter of your life needs to start. Yep, just be done.
Thank you all. Looking back on the writing process and knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently?
I'll go ahead and start again with that one and kind of tying in what both Jess and John said in their last answer. So one thing that I did during the dissertation process that I didn't do with my thesis was writing groups, and not official writing group necessarily, yes, but that social component I think is huge. So Jess touched on that social component, and then John was talking about that advisor, right? So I think one, making sure that even if you're just together with other people in the same room writing, now maybe different, you know, as we were talking about with COVID and everything, maybe do a virtual writing group, but even seeing each other like face to face virtually, and having that kind of accountability and having that time to dedicate to writing and being in that space and just kind of you know, bouncing questions off one another. Sometimes the greatest, you know, discoveries or aha moments just come from talking and sharing with other colleagues, you know, just sharing what you're doing. So I think that social component is really hard. Writing can be isolating, and you are so in your own head so much and focused on that document so much, you know, that we can't forget to have that social piece and that kind of holistic approach, you know, as you guys were both talking about. Both of those I think are so important. And then again, having that advisor connection. We have so many questions as we're going through this stuff, you know. I think having good communication with your chair, having someone that you can go to and just say, you know, is this something I need to explore more, or is this okay, and just kind of move on, you know, because you can spin your wheels on it and spend forever on one or two things. But those are the main things I think I would say about those.
Jessica, John, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think for me, I think from learning from it was balance. How to find balance in the time you spend. So I think, especially from my side, from the engineering standpoint, a lot of times you're constantly jumping back and forth between writing and publishing and trying to put together a conference paper, but also trying to make sure that you can find the balance, right? Always putting the time into it, because I think sometimes you can get stuck in one lane, right? You spend all your time writing, but you're not discovering anything new, or you're spending all your time doing research, and then you're not really moving your needle in your research forward, or you're doing that background research. And so it's really managing time. I think for me, one of the biggest challenges was towards the end, I had a better grasp of it, but at the beginning of the process, I'm like, what should I be spending my time in? Because there are so many things to be done, but knowing that, like, hey, let me just start batching these tasks. Like, I'm going to spend a couple hours with my research. That's going to help me get forward. A couple of hours in the lab doing my experiments and that part of it, while still kind of taking the notes, right? Taking good notes that allow you to get the writing done a little bit easier. Because the worst thing you can do sometimes is just have a bunch of data and then forget what that data was important. Like, you're like, I know it's important. It was there. It gave me some facts, and I have like couple handwritten notes about it, but spend time, take a breath, write a little bit deeper notes, start writing a couple of those paragraphs out in a first draft. Kind of, I've always been kind of a brain dump kind of person, so I'll just write and let my fingers do things and then come back and clean up my paper. And so I probably should spend a little bit more time doing that throughout the process instead of having to go back and be like, so what was I doing again? And then it just kind of puts you back and takes a little bit extra time to kind of think back and reprocess through what was that discovery in those moments throughout. Jess, is there anything you want to share?
Yeah, I really want to echo this idea of right from the beginning of the project. Right from the beginning of the project. And by right with the W and then right as in right now. And just like 15 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, or even just a couple times a week. Like as soon as you start developing an idea, brain dump things down. As soon as you start developing, like if you're doing experimental methods, like start writing about how you create your stimuli, start writing about what your experimental protocol is, start writing out what your planned data analyses are. And it doesn't have to be perfect, and no one ever has to see this. This stuff doesn't have to see the light of day, but it's there for you so that when you can sit down and like really start drafting the formal document, you already have all of this written. And the other half of it is like, for me, writing was so scary for so long because I wanted everything to be perfect. Like I had all these dumb rules in my head about how it had to look and how it had to be perfect and how like, if I died, then, oh my God, people would see my writing and they'd think poorly of me or something. Like, you gotta let that go. You got to let that go and you got to write. And I believe it's an apocryphal story and it's an anecdote. Don't cite me on this. I don't have my sources, but basically there's a saying that, if Abraham Lincoln was asked, if you need to chop down a tree, what would you do? And he said something along the lines of spend hours sharpening my saw beforehand. And that's what writing right from the beginning is. It's not just also getting your ideas down, but it's making the act of writing so much easier. It's practicing. Writing it's not a talent, it's a skill. It is a learned skill that improves with time on task. And if I could go back to me at the beginning of my graduate program, or even just like after I finish my master's and sit myself down and say, Jessica, just start writing. Don't care about the quality, just start putting that time on task. That would have helped me so much. Just letting go and writing and just getting that stuff down, because it will do future you a solid. Let past you help future you. Do future you a solid and have all that information there and the practice of writing.
It looks like in the chat, someone said, would a research journal also help fulfill this purpose of writing down your thoughts, or do you recommend a more structured type of writing, so drafts of each section?
I think a research journal is great. Today I think it's so different than when I was writing my paper, but I feel like is many moons ago, because there's a lot of software out there, right? I think, from the things like Evernote and from the digital side, there's Evernote, there's Notion. I'm sure even OneNote and Google Docs have come so far from when I was working on my dissertation. And a lot of that has to do with just the way that it's easier to get things down on paper, right? But I'm old-fashioned. Even to this day, I still carry around physical notebooks and write everything in there. But for me, it's just getting things down, right? Whatever works best for you, I always say that's where you start. If you're someone that handwrites their papers first, then handwrite your paper if that's what's going to help you get it there. But if you're just one of those, if you grew up and you live on your computer and you type faster than you can handwrite, I'm not. I definitely write faster than I can type. Then you start where it's best for you and getting those thoughts down. That's kind of my opinion on it.
Thank you, John. Jessica, did you want to add anything to that?
Mostly just do what works for you. And so be willing to try things out. And if it's not working, try something different. I mean, experiment on yourself. That's a whole fun part of science, right? You're an N of one and you can try all of this out and you don't even have to get an IRB approval for it. Self-experimentation. So seriously, try. And if try a physical notebook. If that's not working, toss it after a couple of weeks. Try OneNote or Evernote. Try Google Docs. Try different things. And also try to collaborate with other people and see what they do. because maybe they have something that works really well that you didn't think of, and you can be like, I like it, I'm going to do that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh,
Go
yeah,
ahead, Jen.
I was just gonna say, I think the exact same, and that's such an important point. I think that just keep moving on until you find the thing that does work for you. Like, there's nothing wrong with you if the handwriting doesn't work or this doesn't work. You know, everybody has their own unique things, but I think it is important to talk and share and, you know, discuss with other colleagues, you know, what does work for them, what doesn't work for them, because that's how you get those little tips and tricks. So don't feel embarrassed. Do share those, you know, wins and losses with your friends and peers. And yes, right. No matter what, I definitely would tell if I could go back, I would tell myself that as well. And yeah, I think we all struggle with that perfectionism of having this idea that, like, you know, as crazy as it sounds, like Jess said, that, you know, oh, if somebody reads this, like if something happens to me, you know, oh, this is terrible. Just get it down. Like, nobody's going to read it. No one cares. And it just makes everything better later. It all comes together eventually. So give yourself that time and space to just make those mistakes and learn from everything and take it all in. But it does all come together in the end.
What suggestions do you have for dealing with feedback, especially when it can seem overwhelming at times? John, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. Feedback. It's a tough one. It really is, right? And I think it depends who you're getting that feedback from. I think when you get it from your chair and that advisor that you spend more time with than your family with, it's a little bit easier because you know they come from the right place. I remember the first time I got feedback from a journal publication, and it's from somebody you've never met, and you're like, you hate me. And because you're like, it was something silly on my end. It was like the difference between what is a device and what is a sensor. And they had their opinion about it, and we had a different opinion about it. But you're like, am I defining my entire world wrong because of this? But I think knowing where it comes from is part of it. But also just not taking it personal, right? They're critiquing your idea, not you as a person. And your ideas can change. Your ideas are meant to evolve and to get better and to grow as you spend time in your work. And so they should be critiqued and seen for it. But the hardest thing, because we take things personal, we spend a lot of time in it. You put 100 hours in a paper and you're like, this is my life, this is who I am. But it's not. And it's hard to separate it. But I think as you do more papers, as you get more of that feedback, you learn to do it a little bit better every time. It's never easy. But it's remembering that it's not you that they're critiquing, it's the work. And you want them to critique it because you want to put forth the best work possible at the end of the day.
Yeah, one of my writing advisors gave me, or writing mentors had this great way of putting it in terms of the how you take it personally. Nobody likes to be told that their baby is ugly, and our writing feels like our baby. I mean, we like John said, you put 100+ hours in a paper, and it's just like this is so me. But here's the thing: if somebody tells you your baby's ugly, you can't do anything about it. But if somebody tells you there's problems with your writing, you can do something about it. So, but it's okay. It is okay to have feelings. And my personal rule was I didn't read feedback the day I got it because I knew I'd just be super anxious. And then I'd get myself to read the feedback the next day, and I would give myself a cooling down period, usually another 24 hours before I would attempt to address it. Because I knew the day that I read the feedback, I was going to be upset. I would be like yelling at the paper, what do you mean? How do you think that? How can blah, 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 blah. Or I'd be, you know, a puddle of tears. Oh my God, they think I'm stupid. It's the worst. Which none of it, like John said, they're critiquing your ideas. They're not critiquing you. And so you know, have your feelings. Your feelings are valid. Don't let anybody tell you your feelings aren't valid, but your feelings aren't facts. So give yourself time to feel those feelings and then come back to it to the next day and come back to it with a more approach of like, okay, well, what are they really saying here? You know, oh, they're saying this is unclear. and then just take a little note, like comment under their comments, or like have a document with their comments open, and then just start brainstorming notes of like, how can I address this? Of, you know, like they don't agree with my definition of device versus sensor. Well, what's relevant literature to back up what I say? You know, like just scribble down, well, this paper, and this paper. Or, you know, like they say that the paper, this isn't structured right. Okay, well, what can I flip around? And just sort of like really quickly go through with some action items. And then you can start tackling things, but without getting caught up in like the comment. And there are going to be comments from reviewers or from other people who read your work that you're just going to have to say, thank you very much. Your objections are noted, and I'm going to move on. Like, not every comment, there are like, sometimes people do critique the person and not the idea. And you've got to recognize, you know what, that's them, that's not me. I will respectfully see it and I will move on, and I'm not going to let it drag me down. And then you've got to take the times where it's like, okay, there's a critique of a person, but a valid critique of the idea. We'll leave that bit alone, focus on the critique of the idea. And then for the rest of them, like, or if they're like, I don't understand this, then take a moment to try to figure out, well, what is it they don't understand, even if their comment is unclear. And so kind of work through that, get your action items, and then you can start tackling the document. And sometimes for me, it's like, I want to address the easy stuff first. And some days it's like, I want to tackle this big thing first, and then do some of the easy stuff. And it's really whatever works for you that day, or in the workflow that you've got. But figure out something that works for you. But the TLDR, feel your feelings, but then deal with the feedback and keep it separate.
Yeah, and I would just say yes to both of those things. I think those are the main things too. Don't take it personally, and give yourself that time to process it. Because again, as everybody's already mentioned, some comments are going to be more valuable than others, depending who they're coming from, how much time and energy do you put into those comments. So again, I think having a good relationship with your advisor or chair to kind of be able to vent about some of those comments too, if it is from a journal or somewhere else, or get some advice. But yes, I've definitely heard that, like, wait 24 hours to read the comments, and definitely 24 hours before you send any response, right? Because we don't want to email, emotional email, right? Regret the next day. So yeah, definitely I agree with both of those 2 points for sure.
Thank you all. How would you go about navigating conflict with committee members? I know that's sort of a hard question.
So I actually had that kind of happen during my master's a little bit. And I think one important thing to remember is that usually if there's some kind of like conflict or tension or something like that, I've found, with committee members internally on your committee, 99% of the time it has nothing really to do with you or your research. Departments are just like any other workplace, right? There's kind of that workplace drama. There's relationships, there's cliques, there's all of these other social things that we see in any social group, right? And advisors and other people on your committee, they're all humans too. So typically, I haven't heard any stories, where it's too severe, but I would say if it's maybe just, a small disagreement on maybe something they want you to change or add or do to your work, if it's going to affect you, always think about what is it that you really want, and then talk that through with your advisor or chair. And I would kind of keep that connection. And sometimes it's okay to change your chairs. I actually did change my chair from my master's thesis to my dissertation. And it's probably, one of the greatest things I could have done for my experience. And a lot of that had to do with what did I need out of an advisor or chair? So do you need someone who's going to be kind of more hands-on or one-on-one? Do you need someone who is more hands-off and lets you do your thing and come back to it? Think about what you need out of those relationships, and then make sure that your chair is kind of your biggest champion, right? And in your corner and there to help you kind of figure out what it is you're trying to say and do. And usually I think if you have that solid, then any other kind of conflicts can typically be resolved from that.
Do you guys have anything you'd like to add to that? If not, I could jump into the next question. How did you go about setting aside and managing your time?
Well, that is what, oh, sorry. I didn't see you unmute. Sorry. I was just going to say real quick, that's one thing that I definitely changed from my thesis to my dissertation, is time management and how I thought about my own research and writing. So even though we aren't getting paid for this, right? This is our work. We're doing it to get finished. I think it's almost important to think of your work like a job, and schedule in those hours. You know, it doesn't have to be every day. It does, you know, just however much you can give to it. Really treat that time with the importance that you would give these other things, and take some time to schedule in work on it. Because if we just say, oh, I'll do it later, I'll work on this later, and there's, you know, it shouldn't be too rigid, right? Don't get mad at yourself if you have to push things a day. But I think it is important to kind of have that schedule and timeline for yourself as a way to kind of judge your own progress. But that's definitely what I would say. Have a timeline and kind of keep track of
that. I would definitely echo Jen in, like, this is your job. Your PhD is your job. You are here to get a degree, a terminal degree, and you're here to do it hopefully in like not 10 years. And I say that as I took 7 years to do my degree from bachelor's, from when I started till when I finished. But I also made a couple of decisions along the way about what I was doing and had funding opportunities. But anyway, point being, treat it like a job and 100% schedule it in. And remember that the goal is to finish the PhD. It is not to eternally stay a student, as fun as it sometimes is to be an eternal student. I did that for a very long time. And that it's then the stepping stone into where you're going next, which is actually the fun part. Like, we get caught up in like the grind of the PhD and everything we're doing, and forget that we're really only here for a brief period of time, so we can move on with our lives and to get to do the things that we wanted to do, that we needed to get the PhD so that we could go do them. And so really it took a shift in my mindset to really realize, no, I need to finish, which means I need to treat this like a job, and I need to schedule in writing time, and I need to make timelines and goals and SMARTY plans, because now we've added an I for impact on top of your SMART goals. And what's the impact? Finishing your PhD, becoming a doctor, saying, yes, actually, I am a doctor, or the doctor says so, or all those fun things that you need to do to motivate yourself to say, right. Sit there and write, focus on your dissertation. Obviously, you've got teaching. Obviously, you've got service. You've got a lot of other things that we do as PhD students, but you remember to keep your eyes on the prize of what matters to you most, and that's to finish the PhD. And you need to schedule in that time and say, I need to write here. I need to work on methods development, protocol, IRB. I need to work on data collection, data analysis, or literature search, or whatever it is. Sorry, I come from an experimental background, so I always give with that. But whatever it is in your degree that's necessary for you to do the work, to contribute, and to show that you can finish the document, you need to break those down into contingent steps, set those goals, start assigning time values and time schedules to them, keep yourself on track, whether it's like a big honking calendar, like a multi-year calendar, or like a big year at a glance thing, and start putting things there and then breaking that task down, whatever it takes for you to get your butt in your chair and writing and or working on this. That's what you need to do. And you need to like get that mindset in that I am here to finish, to get on with my life.
Well, that is so true. I think to kind of tangent to it all though is also understanding yourself, right? I think we all have different pockets. Some people are morning writers, some people are afternoon writers, some people are night writers. I was a night writer, so you would find me writing. Yes, night writer, awesome. But you would often find me writing from like 6 in the evening till 10 o'clock at night, because that's when I was the most productive writing. I also was towards the end of my dissertation, I was also working full time. So I had a full-time job that went along with my dissertation work. So at that point, it was like, hey, now you're really finding time. You're squeezing every minute out of your day to like work your 40-hour job, do that well, while still like trying to finish up this paper that you know needs to get done. And let's not even talk about oral defenses. That's a whole different subject. And getting ready for that. But it's kind of just managing that. So I always knew I enjoy writing late at night. So I would just make sure that my day had time so that I could do what I needed to do during the day. And then at night, I would do that. In terms of like the research side, my lab work was always super late at night because I would get easily distracted by friends in the office because we'd start talking about the newest thing, and it was terrible sometimes. Having great lab partners is a pros and a con. So you would find me in the lab from like 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. doing tests and stuff because that was the only time it was quiet. But I knew that's what worked for me. I'm a night owl. It works. I could sleep during the day. But you have to kind of know what works best for you. If you are I need 8 hours of sleep every night, I need to be in bed by 10 and up at 6, then that's it. Not at 8, then great. But then you have to know that, right? Then you have to use whatever time else you have around your day to fit everything in. And I think it goes with everything we've been saying at this point. You have to, through this journey, you learn a lot about yourself, what works best for you, because it is such a self-driven process to finish, to get to the end. And so you do have to learn a lot about yourself throughout this whole thing.
What advice do you have for setting realistic goals?
So I'll start as the goals coach here. I guess I should start. You know, it's having someone to bounce some things off of. You know, whether it's your chair, your mentor, even just one of your fellow graduate students, right? Understand what they are, understand your limitations. We always say when setting goals, especially time goals, multiply what you think by about a 1.5 because it'll take about 1.5 times longer than you think. We always estimate our time with best case scenarios. I mean, even if you think about how long it's going to take you to get home this afternoon, if you're not working from home, like you're going to be like, oh, it'll take me half an hour, and then it'll take you like 45 minutes. Because either you took a little bit longer to get out of the office, or you ran into somebody on the street, you caught every red light. It's just part of what life is like. And so keeping that in mind a little bit is a big help with that. But in terms of knowing the scale of goals, I always say break things down as small as you can. The smaller you can break down the goal, the better understanding you'll have of it, and the more likely you'll be able to accomplish it. I'm a big fan of set small goals, celebrate, and just keep moving and just cycle through that. Because the hardest thing is to set some really big goals and then you're stuck in a 6-month process, and then you just don't feel any relief from it. So when you set those 2-week goals, you hit it, you can celebrate a little bit, you kind of get that high. Especially from my psychology and my sociology people here, right? Those mental things, you want those dopamines, and then you just keep going. And that kind of helps you going instead of you just being like, when is it over? When is it over? When is it over? But yeah, that's a little bit from my perspective about scaling.
Yeah. Oh, whoops, sorry. Oh, go ahead.
You sure? Okay. So for me, a big deal was learning about the difference between process versus outcome goals, because I used to just set outcome goals of like, boom, I want to have this method section done, or I just want to have the whole document done in like 3 months. And then I wouldn't have any idea of how I would get there. And then I inevitably wouldn't get there. And that was demoralizing. So learning about process goals, where it's less about what the outcome is, but it's like setting a goal for a task, and then like self-experimentation. So it would be like, write 10 minutes a day for 3 days this week. And if I made that goal, it'd be like, awesome, celebrate, you get a dopamine hit, you successfully accomplished a goal. And then I'd be like, okay, well, maybe I want to try like 4 days, 10 minutes next week. And I'd see if I could, or 3 days, 15 minutes or something like that. And I'd just sort of nudge the goals around, and week by week, I'd be making progress. And I'd also be sort of calibrating what I could do. And like the goal was to actually meet the goals, to set realistic goals that I could achieve, rather than starting with, I'm going to write 5 days for 60 minutes, like from the get-go, which 100% is a way to fail. And failing doesn't feel good. Nobody likes failing. So start small. And even if it seems like it's not like, oh gosh, what can I get done in 10 minutes, 3 days a week? Well, first is, once you get that 10 minutes done, you're probably going to keep going. And that's a good thing. And the other thing is that's still 30 minutes more of writing than you would have done in a normal week, where you were like, oh yeah, I'm going to write 5 times 60 minutes. And then it's like, oh, the dog needs walked, or the cats need fed, or the, like I got to do this thing. I got to teach the class. I got to have office hours, and then you never get anything done. But setting those small achievable goals and achieving them, and then sort of calibrating, and then also look at your week ahead and say, okay, it's like Thanksgiving break and I'm going to go visit my family. Or, like my kid has a soccer tournament coming up and I know I'm going to be super busy. So just slide your goals back a little bit so that you can still make progress and accomplish them. Even though it's a little less, you're still making that incremental progress. And doing those sort of process goals where you're engaging in the process of writing, or the process of the literature search, or the process of whatever, you're still moving forward. And eventually at the end of the semester, you turn back around and you go, holy crap, how did I get all that done? And you started with 10 minutes a day. And really, it's about starting small and building consistency, because consistency is key. And anything is more than nothing. Doing something is always going to get you somewhere much further than setting this huge goal and then making no progress on it. And then also turning around and reflecting. So for me, as an experimentalist, I keep track of everything. I had a spreadsheet for the last 3 or 4 years where I tracked all my writing. And man, after that first year, which was kind of like that baseline of trying to figure out, well, this is what I could write, then I could set a goal of like, I want to write 20% more than I did last year. And then I want to write 20% more than that. And I could track how many days I wrote. I could track how many minutes I wrote per month, all these sorts of things. And having that data to look at, I love fancy spreadsheets. I love visualizations of data, and having that for myself was actually incredibly motivating. And I would also reward myself with stickers, because I'm a dork and I love stickers and glitter and rhinestones. And I would like write with fancy inks and give myself stickers. So like finding these things that work for you and that are motivating for you, while also setting manageable, concrete goals that are more about doing the thing than what comes out of it, you're going to get somewhere. But anyway, that's my take on it.
Yeah, and I agree again with both of them. Everything I think that you both said is exactly spot on. The only thing I would add is it makes me think of when I was going through the dissertation process, I read somewhere this analogy that you should almost treat yourself with your goals and expectations the way you would treat an employee of yours. So for example, let's say, hopefully if you were a good if you were a kind person, the way you would treat your employee, right? So say again that you miss a day because something happens, right? Don't get down on yourself. You wouldn't fire someone because they called out one day, right, or missed one thing. So give yourself that same kind of leniency that you would give others. Don't be so hard on yourself, that you get down on yourself and get more bogged down and behind. But at the same time, if you were an employer, you also wouldn't let that person just do whatever they want, have no accountability, and just say, oh, okay, yeah, we'll just keep paying you, right? So finding that balance of personal accountability, but still being kind and patient with yourself, because it is a process. And I definitely think the slow and steady wins the race applies with this whole thing. So keep that consistency going. And even if it is just those small little wins, like those are huge and those add up. And that is what makes that final paper.
What resources did you use or wish you had used?
I guess I'll start the writing group thing. That I think was really helpful for me. And we sometimes read each other's papers and gave comments, but it was more of like just meeting at this place at this time and writing together. And I wish I would have been able to do that for my thesis, because it did help with my dissertation so much. But that's the only thing I think I would have done differently, was kind of implement some of that social aspect with the writing sooner, because it does help keep that encouragement up, I think.
I think for myself, I'm not sure actually, to be honest with everyone here. Like, I didn't have writing groups, so I don't know what that's like. That sounds fun though. Now that you guys all shared about it, but I think for me, a lot of it was just kind of some digital resources. I ended up changing the word processor that I use several times throughout my work. I ended up using this software called LaTeX. It's very technical. It makes things writing, I'm sure. I think we all find it eventually. And they're like, oh, here, you just input this and all the formatting is taken care of for you. You're like, oh, I spent years spending hours on formatting and I could have done it this way. Great. But I think it's just learning, right, what software is available. I think from technical resources, there's a lot out there now that makes life a lot easier. Even from things like Google Scholar, right? Nobody has to go to the libraries anymore to find journal articles. But now we have online, but it's still finding good resources, right? I think sometimes often the challenge and kind of siphoning through it all. That's some of the ones that come to mind right away, and kind of keeping all of your things organized from the get-go.
Yeah, I think organization, like figuring out an organizational system that had worked for me earlier. I wish I had done more experimentation earlier. And also when I did my master's, I was still printing everything out, because at that point, like I didn't have a touch screen or anything like that. So it was only when I was doing my quals and into my dissertation when I had a Surface with a Surface Pen, and I started just dumping all of my PDFs into Microsoft OneNote and highlighting and annotating in there. But even then, I still wish I had had a better organizational system, because I was still relying on my own memory to remember, like, why did I have this article, or what article is this piece of information in? So, and there's so many ways to do that, whether it's Mendeley, which then will also do citations for you, which I still don't have a handle on. I still do my citations by hand because I'm a Luddite, but whatever. Like there's a lot of technology. Try it. Like going back to things we said earlier, try it out, and don't be afraid to make mistakes, and don't be afraid to just see if it works for you. If it works for you, great, keep using it. And if it doesn't work for you, then just move on. But like using technology to figure out an organizational system that works for you, I think would be like, I wish I had taken advantage of like trying that out earlier. And then writing groups. I wish I had stayed more involved. I did both writing production groups like Jen did, where you all kind of get in a room and you're all just ticka, but it's that sort of group thing of everybody's involved in writing. And I also did feedback and accountability groups where we would meet and we'd take like 2 to 3 pages of double-spaced writing. We'd first check in about goals, where we'd say what goals we accomplished over the last week, and then we'd say what our goals were for the next week. And we kind of workshop it in terms of like, hey, you're not meeting this goal consistently, like what's going on? And we'd sort of talk it out. And also like people would call you out if you set kind of unrealistic goals and be like, hey, maybe we should back that off. And then we'd also like spend 15-20 minutes reading each other's writing and giving feedback really quickly. And that really helped as well. And I wish I had gotten involved in that earlier, because it really gave me this accountability to actually produce something. Because one of the rules of the group is you couldn't bring the same piece of writing over and over and over again unless it was heavily worked on. So I had to constantly be generating. So getting involved in that earlier, I think I wish I had done
that. What did you learn from the process? And is there anything else you guys would like to share?
I think overall, through this whole process, as everyone has mentioned so far, it's part of this is about figuring out yourself and what works for you. Planning wise, reward wise, all of these things, what type of person you are you a night worker, a day worker, all of these things that you figure out in the process. It's a lot of identity stuff and a lot of identity work. So I think taking some time to reflect on that and enjoy that, because, as you mentioned earlier, we feel like we're here forever, right? And that we're these perpetual students and that this is just the way we're going to be forever, but it's not true. And so to kind of embrace some of that stuff and spend some time, celebrating that you figured out, hey, I like this type of planning rather than this, or, that's just as important, I think, going through this process, because those are the things that you're going to take away with you and you're going to use no matter what you do, right? You're going to learn what skills or how to use your skills best for you and how you operate best and how you're most successful and how you thrive under what conditions, things like that. What kind of rewards you like. So don't forget that that's part of this whole process too, and to kind of take some time to enjoy that and be reflexive about it, I think, and really kind of take it to heart. And don't be afraid to change what's not working and to, tell others about the things that are working, because I think, again, a lot of times when we're going through this process, it can be very isolating, but always sharing with others, whether it's your chair or your peers going through the process, what your wins are, what is working for you. I think that's just as helpful as talking about what's not. So yeah, I think that was probably the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much echo what Jen said, especially like the importance of sharing your wins. I mean, gosh, humans, we love sharing happiness, and you've got this thing and it's really cool and you want to share it with other people, and it can actually potentially help other people. And they're also going to help celebrate you because we're all in this together. We're all going through this same very difficult process of the PhD. It is a challenging process. It is challenging emotionally, it is challenging mentally, it's challenging physically. So make sure you take care of your holistic health, and that mental health boost of sharing your wins, no matter how you may feel embarrassed, you may feel like a little oh, like nobody cares. Yeah, actually we do. And it can help, and it also just helps you. And because that isolation is kind of it's not good for you. And also in the end, science and education and academia, it's all a team effort. And we forget that sometimes in the isolating nature of the PhD. But when you finish, you are going to be working with other people. You aren't going to be doing it all alone, going it all. I mean, none of us go it all alone. All of us are always enmeshed in webs upon networks of interactions, and take advantage of them. Absolutely take advantage of them. And then, so this is a thing in terms of something I learned, or I wish I knew during the process, that I actually learned here at work, because part of my job is creating these literature reviews where I'm basically given a brief by a client on they want to know information about something, and they present a series of questions that I need to answer. And it's actually been revolutionary to me because I've got 10 days to write a 10,000 to 15,000 word literature review and get it done to publication quality. And that's the fastest I've ever written. And man, I wish I could do my dissertation now because I would knock that thing out. But anyway, presenting the outline as a series of questions helped me so much. Because when I was writing my master's, when I was writing my papers for my dissertation, in outlining, it's always this feeling I know this, statement, 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 statement. And I never felt like I knew this enough. I never felt like I knew enough what I was going to write for me to have a useful outline. If I could go back in time and write my outline as a series of questions that I wanted to answer, say, well, what do we need to know about this? And then what do we need to know about these subpoints? And writing your outline as a series of questions that you don't know the answer to at the beginning, but by the end, as you develop the document, you will know the answers to those. Gosh, that would have been a game changer for me, to know that it's okay to not know, because, well, why are we in our PhDs anyway if we already knew all this stuff? But just that mindset change of, I'm out to discover this and I'm out to answer this. And it's okay not to know it at the beginning, because that's why I'm doing the work, instead of putting the cart before the horse of like proclaiming stuff I don't even know for sure and feeling uncertain about it. So if I could go back, I would write all my outlines as questions so that I could write the document as an answer.
Yeah, I think for me, the lesson is enjoy the journey. I think it's the last thing I will want to tell you guys. Like, I think, one, good on you that you want to go down this road of you know, your master's or your dissertation, because it is not for the faint of heart. It is. I will never say this is an easy journey going forward, but find the joy in it, because there are moments that are very joyous through it, right? I know we've talked about the hard times and we talked about the struggles today, but it is a really much, it's a journey of, there's a lot of joy that comes from it. You know, enjoy the ups, enjoy the downs. You learn from them. You learn about yourself. But at the end of the day, you know, it's worth it, right? You know, at the end of the day that you want this PhD for some reason. Everyone has their motivations for it, whether it's just to be called doctor at the end of the day, or it's because, you know, you want to make this contribution, or do you have a passion for a particular subject matter? Yes, yes, I love that cup. I need to go find that cup now. Thank you, Jessica. But at the end of the day, enjoy that journey, because you're going to do it. Hopefully, you're only going to do it once. I don't know if I'd ever want to do it again. Maybe. I might have a sadistic side. I might want to do it again. But generally, right now, I never want to do it again. And you're going to go through it once, but it's a fun journey at the end of the day. When you get to the end, that reward and that satisfaction of what you did, there's very little that matches it. So.
Thank you all. Before we wrap up, Jennifer, if you don't mind just touching on the thesis and dissertation formatting appointments that the graduate college has to offer.
Yeah, for sure. So when you get to the point that you're ready to defend your thesis or dissertation, that's usually when students start looking at the different materials that the grad college wants you to do. Wants you to do your formatting and all of this, the graduation requirements. So make sure to go onto the website and take a look at what are the different requirements that you're going to have to do for your paper for the grad college. And it's not too bad. It's not usually anything very hard. Typically, it's just things like adding a cover page, and we give you different formatting manuals and examples of what things should look like. And we actually have thesis and dissertation formatting office hours now every Tuesday and Thursday, from 12 to 2, where we'll come on and meet with you if you have questions about, doing the page numbers or different things like that. But I guess my biggest advice is the earlier you look at it, the better. Most of the stuff that they're requiring you to do is things that you're going to do anyway. So this is just making sure that all of the different documents that leave UNLV are somewhat consistent, right? Everyone's cover page will look the same. Everyone's, table of contents will be similar. And this is because when your work is done, right, your thesis or dissertation, this is going to go on that university website for people to read, for other scholars to find, your peers. So we want to make sure that it looks professional and that again, there is kind of that consistency through the university. So I definitely recommend checking out our website. I'm not sure if there's a way, Mar, we can, if there's any kind of follow-up email that will go out to everyone. Maybe we can include the link for, the TD formatting website, and then put the office hours information on there. But I definitely suggest doing that. And please trust me and know that we try and make it as simple and user-friendly as possible. you know, again, I'm the one doing it and I just finished. So I understand that the last thing anyone wants to do is spend time talking about, you know, page numbers and headings, things like that. Which again, they seem like such little things, but sometimes it can be, you know, just frustrating or difficult to kind of get some of those things done. So we definitely provide all the tools we can to make that kind of as smooth and easy as possible. Because again, we want it to look professional and nice. You have spent so much time on this document that it should get that kind of attention, right? And that kind of respect, that it looks, you know, good to go out to everyone else and everyone's going to be reading this. Oh, go ahead. Yes.
I just wanted to throw in a plug that as somebody working in industry, I actually use styles. I use the separate section page breaks to do different, like I use all of the stuff I learned in formatting my dissertation and thesis in my job. So it's not just like an administrative hoop to jump through. It's not actually that difficult. Like their documents are really super easy because I refreshed everything based on all the PDFs. Like I had to do it myself because COVID. So I couldn't even go in and consult and be like, I'm legitimately using these things and they're really not difficult and I still remember how to do them. So you can do it and it's actually worthwhile and you will probably use it no matter where you go. And if nothing else, your documents will look super pretty.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. And that is typically, you know, the types of things that I hear from people, that I've never learned how to do this, or I've never, you know, had to do like the page breaks or this and that. But it is, once you learn those little tricks, it does make everything look super nice, and it's going to be impressive to any employer, you know, when you come in and everything looks, you know, just so. And so I really appreciate that. Thank you.
We are out of time, so I just wanted to say thank you so much to our speakers for sharing your time and expertise with us today. And thank you to our participants for joining us. We'll meet the participants back over in Remo, and we'll be posting this on the Graduate College YouTube channel for everybody's reference. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you guys again so much.